Now, you are holding a rally, the How Many More rally on April 29th in Austin, Texas. What can you tell us about this event?
So the event will be held April 29th on the steps of the state capitol. It's from 1 to 4 p.m. And the goal is literally to bring in thousands upon thousands of people, not just from the state of Texas, from all over the country. And the title of the rally really says it all. How many more people have to die of fentanyl poisoning or an overdose? How many more young girls, young boys have to be sold into sexual slavery? How many more ranchers have to be overrun by illegal immigrants? How many of our hospitals here in Texas and all around the country have to be overwhelmed by people who come to this country illegally? We have an invasion taking place at our southern border. And the idea is that the federal government's not doing anything about it. So Texans and the Texas legislature and the Texas governor are going to have to.
So let's talk about those actions that are being taken. There are a couple of bills that are on the table right now. One is House Bill 20. And this is it's an interesting bill because, as you were saying, it sort of puts that power in the state's hand, which states do have rights to do all sorts of things. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here because immigration really is, the border is a federal issue as well. But as
Right.
you said, the federal government may not be acting in accordance with the will of the people there. So tell us about House Bill 20. Why is this an important bill and what is contained in it?
Yeah, so just to go into the legal issue first, you're correct that immigration is a federal issue. And according to US v. Arizona, Supreme Court case back from 2010, that the states have no power to enforce immigration law. I don't necessarily agree with that decision, but that's the state of the law right now. What the states do have the power to do, according to Article 1, Section 10, subsection 3 of the United States Constitution, is to repel invasion, to prevent imminent danger. I would argue Texas is not in imminent danger. Texas is in the middle of an invasion. The danger is already here, it's already manifesting itself. As I said, in overrun hospitals, overrun schools, violence along our border. The cartels control our entire border. So there's an invasion taking place. And so the state has to declare that that invasion is taking place. One of the things that HB 20 does is it is the legislature declaring that invasion. I think the most important provision of HB 20 is the creation of a border protection unit. And this is the unit that will be directly under the control of the governor. He'll appoint the head of it. And their job will be to physically repel that invasion, meaning actually move people back across the border, prevent people from crossing the border. And again, the legal distinction is important, not to enforce immigration law, but to repel an ongoing invasion.
So, one of the elements of this that is interesting is that law abiding citizens without criminal backgrounds, they would be able to be part of this border protection unit. And some critics have said that opens the door to abuse and danger. I'd love to get your take on that because it seems like that piece of the puzzle is one of the most controversial on this proposal.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The word that you hear used all the time is vigilantes and vigilantism. And the reality is, I've read the bill. I know a lot of people don't actually do that. Last time I looked, it was a 25-page bill. There's going to be a new committee substitute with some technical corrections, but I've read the whole bill. It's not just average citizens can pack firearms and head down to the border and do whatever they want. These are people who have to go through law enforcement training. So they're going to be recruiting an entire new branch of law enforcement, the Border Protection Unit. I imagine a lot of those folks will come over from other branches of law enforcement, maybe from the National Guard, maybe from the State Guard, but they have to go through full law enforcement training before they can be down there on the border. There's not going to be any vigilanteism.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, right? Because that is the piece of the puzzle, and you are absolutely right. We have seen this many times with the "Don't Say Gay" bill, which is not the name of the bill, and it's not even
Right.
in the bill. The word with the word "gay" in Florida, where people haven't read the bill, but they're sort of basing opinions on media coverage of it or characterizations of it that may not be accurate. In this case, one of the other factors, and we can dig more into these proposed units, but Title 42, this rule that will be essentially expiring in May, that sort of ups the ante on the importance here, it would seem, of doing something in the eyes of proponents. Take us through that. What are the dangers of Title 42 expiring? And actually give us a little background on it, too, so people understand it.
Yeah, Title 42 was an emergency measure passed to allow Border Patrol, the federal Border Patrol, to repel people coming across the border based on health. And so it's a health and safety issue. It was about the pandemic, it was about COVID specifically. And so, really, as much as I would like Title 42 to stay in place, with the COVID emergency being withdrawn, Title 42 probably should expire. The problem with that is over 2.5 million people have been kept out of the country. because of their status under Title 42, because they didn't have clean bills of health and they were able to be sent back to Mexico or to their other countries of origin. So at this point, what that does is if you just imagine that all of those 2.5 million had been led into the country, as so many are right now, it's going to create an overwhelming wave of illegal immigration into this country once Title 42 is withdrawn. And, this is one of the things a lot of people don't know. There's a communications network that flows down through Central and South America, and frankly, into countries all across the world, and lets potential illegal immigrants know when it's safe to come, how difficult it's going to be. And with Title 42 expiring, the message is now's the time to come. Joe Biden's your friend. The administration's your friend. They're going to let you in. Title 42 isn't going to be in place anymore. So time to flood the border. So that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, the other piece of this, and I know that you've talked about this, and there is actually some data that we can reference that you've commissioned, on this, which gives some opinions from Americans across the country. But what actually goes on at the border? Because one of the things, this is sort of presented as this binary, easy sort of situation. People are fleeing violence, they're coming to America, and you have to, let them in because you have to help them. But along the way, there's a lot of danger for a lot of these people. The immigrants who are coming through, those seeking asylum, take us through some of the things that happen to them as a result of the current system that we have right now.
Yeah, so I think one of the most horrifying statistics, and it's hard to get accurate data on this. So I want to be clear, the data is fuzzy on this one. But what we know is when you look at all the numbers of the females that are raped as they make the journey up through South and Central America and come across our border, the number at a minimum that I've seen is 30% of women who make that journey will be raped. And what I've heard over the last couple of days from Border Patrol agents and others who are working the border, that women actually go on birth control. They take the Depo-Provera shot or they go on other birth control to make the journey because the odds of being raped are so high. And again, this is why the name How Many More, because how many more can we as human beings say is the right number of women to be raped or sexually assaulted on their way to this country? When you have a magnet like this, when you remove Title 42, you are encouraging women and others to make this journey. They will be injured along the way. The question is how badly. And I think we have to ask the question is, will they even survive? I've talked to a bunch of the ranchers down along the border. They regularly find bodies on their properties. I mean, it's a giant morgue all along our southern border. Again, how many more bodies do the ranchers have to find on their properties before people like you and me and just average Americans will say, I can't have this on my conscience anymore?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's presented very often like one side doesn't want anybody to come over. And look, there have been, critiques of Title 42. Obviously, it was put in place during the pandemic in 2020. It had only been used once before, historically, but that it was put in place to stop immigrants from coming, to stop, asylum seekers. And that conversation can happen. But the reality is right now, the current system, what you're describing are people dying, being maimed, being injured as they're trying to get here. You also have people being hired essentially to bring these people over. You have children who are being sent unaccompanied. I mean, there's so many issues here with the current system the way it is. One of the things that I found surprising, and feel free to react to anything I just said as well, but there was one statistic that really stood out to me in one of the surveys you recently commissioned, that over 35% of voters said that human trafficking of women and children was a top concern for them when it came to the border crisis. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's both horrifying and encouraging to me. The fact that we have human trafficking going on. And frankly, one of the things that I really don't like about the term human trafficking is it is sanitizing what's actually going on. We think of ourselves as a country that outlawed slavery because of the Civil War back in the 1860s. And the reality is we have a huge, huge slave trade in the United States right now. The vast majority of it is a sexual slave trade, but people are also just indentured servants essentially now. They're beholden to these cartels. Folks might have seen the news reports where people are coming across wearing bracelets, like entry bracelets, like you might get if you were going into Disneyland. They say how much people owe, where they're going, what their destination is. And then those people's families are essentially held hostage in their home countries. Those people are tracked here in the United States. They owe measurable amounts of money to these cartels. The cartels are making $150 billion a year. It's estimated. This is a major international business. So like, I'm horrified by what's going on. I am heartened by the fact that you have 30+% of Americans say that they are also horrified. And then again, I just keep asking the question of myself. This is an exercise that got me involved in this. I said, as a Christian man, I'm going to put a piece of paper in front of myself and I'm going to write the number of how many more women I think it's okay to be raped on this journey. I'm going to write the number of how many more children I think it's okay to be sold into sex slavery. I'm going to write the number of how many more people right now, every 7 minutes, somebody dies of fentanyl poisoning. How many is the right number for me as an individual that I can put on my paper that my conscience can bear? And the only appropriate number for me was zero. I can't say, well, the rest is okay. Because one of the things I keep hearing that frustrates me is, well, in a couple of years, maybe we'll have a new administration and they'll do something about that. That means at least 140,000 Americans will die of fentanyl poisoning. Is that number okay for me? And my answer personally is no. I just can't tolerate that. That's why we're doing this rally, because something has to be done right now.
You have a number of other factors as well, right? I mean, you think about terrorism, you think about these other issues. If people are able to permeate the border, these are things you have to think about. It does become a national security issue, not just a security issue for the states on the border like Texas. When you look at everything we've talked about here, because you have a crisis situation on the border, you have a real conversation about people fleeing violence, and you understand from a human level, from a Christian level, how do you help people who are fleeing violence? At the same time, you understand the need for a border and for border patrol and for keeping people out who don't need to be there and allowing people in through an organized system. So a lot of people, they look at this issue and it's overwhelming to them because they say, well, what should the federal government be doing right now that they are not? So if somebody posed that question to you, how would you react to it?
Yeah, I don't think that question is that complicated. I think we overcomplicate it. And the federal government has the legal obligation to secure our borders. And contrary to what Secretary Mayorkas says under oath, the border's not secure. I've talked to lots of Border Patrol agents and others in law enforcement who are down there all the time. I've talked to the reporters who've been down there all the time. Jason Jones, who will be speaking at our rally, spends a lot of time down there. Laura Logan spends a lot of time down there. I had lunch with her this week. What they will tell you is that there is no border, actually. I mean, even in places where the border wall has been built, what you see is it might be secure where the wall is, and then you turn 100 yards to your left and the wall ends, and you can see the migrants just pouring, illegal immigrants pouring across the border at those places. And by the way, and this is important for people to understand, all of this stuff, very well controlled. This is not just some random flow of people across the border. Nobody makes it across the border without paying what they call the tax, the border tax. And that's to the cartels. It's very well regulated. The cartels stage all these people in city plazas all across Mexico. They move them up through Mexico on a regulated sequence. They open the borders. Literally, it's up to the cartels. The cartels say when people will cross and when they're not crossing, how many will cross, who crosses. And they also use this, and this is a part of the problem that people don't understand. They use these waves of crossings as cover for all the drugs and other illicit stuff that they're bringing across the border. So if they flood the zone with people coming across, asking for asylum, asking to be processed, which most of these people are asking to be processed, then it's very hard for any border patrol agents to be looking at other areas of the border and interdicting drug traffickers, right? And so this is why so much fentanyl is able to make it across our border, for example.
Well, this is a major crisis. I appreciate you taking the time to break it down. Where can people go for more information on the rally?
Yeah, folks can go to howmanymore.com. You'll see all the speakers there. You get all the details of how to attend. You can RSVP there. We recommend that you do that. If you RSVP, what you're going to end up getting is you'll get notices about where to park and exactly how to get in and out, because we're expecting literally thousands upon thousands of people to flood the Texas Capitol.
Well, I so appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.